The Watership Down podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There definitely will be spoilers. This episode is scripted by Newell Fisher, Cheapy 2006 and Goldenhorn 12 Studios GOJ. It is narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down Podcast episode 196, in which after the longest ever break between episodes, 7 weeks to be exact, we will at last be looking at the first of the elite, functional or specialist characters who left Sandalford Warren, Dandelion, the storyteller and runner. This is a change of plan from what I originally intended, as I wanted to get these character studies finished before episode 200. However, it has become obvious that would have meant several episodes well over an hour long, so I've had a rethink. So, in the next episode we will look at Blackberry, and then Bigwig, Fiver and Hazel will be given 2 episodes each, with episode 200 falling between the episodes on Bigwig and Fiver. I would like to sincerely thank all of you who have sent your good wishes during my recent illness. It really meant a lot, and I hope that all of you who celebrate it had a wonderful Christmas and are having a happy new year in 2025. And may I also take this opportunity to wish those of you who celebrate it a happy Lunar New Year at the end of this month. For those of you listening to this podcast after the event, the gap between this episode and the last one will mean nothing. However, there has been a 7-week break since episode 195, which is unprecedented in the history of this normally weekly podcast. And ironically, as we're looking at a storyteller in this episode, I have a bit of a tale to tell myself. There are times in life that you are so ill that you do not realise just how ill you are. My recent illness was one of them, and it resulted in a week-long stay in hospital just before Christmas, being treated by our wonderful, though very underfunded NHS. I think you can hear how unwell I was becoming during the Pipkin section of the last episode. It turns out that I was developing bacterial pneumonia, and it was only detected by sheer chance. This came completely out of left field, following the entirely separate health issues that have plagued me since August, which were beginning to be resolved. After I came home from hospital, I had neither the concentration to finish scripting this episode, nor the voice to narrate anything, hence the long delay, for which I can only apologise. In episode 193, I announced that this podcast would stop being weekly after we finished going through the graphic novel. Well, circumstances have brought that forward a bit. So while I prepare the remainder of these longer character study episodes, please bear with me. And I in turn will try to be upfront with you about how long there will be between episodes going forward. You deserve no less. For a start, I can tell you for certain that there will be at least a 2-week gap between episodes until we get to the graphic novel, and very probably after that as well. On the subject of Christmas, one of my gifts this year was the British Film Institute re-release of the 1978 film of Watership Down. The printed extras that accompany this are very well presented, and I look forward to being able to give my reaction to the re-released version of the film, as well as the extras, just as soon as I manage to get hold of a Blu-ray player. A listener from Ireland with the handle Cheapy2006 recently left a YouTube comment way back on episode 7 in which I addressed Lapine grammar. I will read the comment out, though it is worth reading the original as it involves the use of accents over letters. Quote, "Loving this podcast, great work. I'm not a linguist, but being Irish I know a bit of Gaelic from my school days, most of it long forgotten. On your mention of accents over the letter E going from bottom left to top right in the word ule, we have the same thing in Gaelic. It's called a fodder. I hope I pronounced that correctly, spelt F-A-D-A, the D is soft. A Gaelic fodder means the vowel is to be pronounced long, so A is or, E is A, I is E, O is O, U is oo. You nailed the E in ule, at least to an Irish ear. A French man might quibble though." End quote. Thank you, Cheapy2006, and welcome to the Owsler. Your comment also qualifies for inclusion in the podcast index, which will be introduced in episode 200. And to everyone listening, I'm sorry if I've missed any other comments that also deserve inclusion. Please let me know if I have. However, please bear in mind that such comments need to relate to more than just the episode being commented upon or the previous episode, and they need to have a wider relevance to an ongoing subject of discussion in the podcast. This one definitely qualifies. Next, following episode 195, there has been an interesting comment on YouTube and about Buckthorn from Goldenhorn 12 Studios GOJ. Quote, "Buckthorn is genuinely the most underrated character amongst Watership Down media and even fans, and it sucks. Dude was ride or die for his homies, got a bitten leg and bloody face to show for it, and even helped found a joint warren with Watership and became one of the most respected rabbits in both of them. But that ain't cool, I guess. Hashtag justice for Buckthorn. End quote. I completely agree, and that is a hashtag I can really get behind. Once again, welcome to the Owsler. Lastly, at the beginning of December, Owsler member Eric Stepp sent me 6 photographs of a Watership Down board game that came out in Germany at around the turn of the century to coincide with the children's TV series. I've posted them on the Instagram account and in all the usual social media spaces. Thank you, Eric. Anyway, let's get back to business at long last as we look at the character of Dandelion. Dandelion, the storyteller and runner. We first meet Dandelion in the novel as Hazel and Fiver discuss their meeting with the Threarar with him and Blackberry. When Bigwig turns up after leaving the Owsler, then asks Hazel outright if he will be leaving, Dandelion's first words are an exclamation at the suggestion, which is followed by Hazel resolving to do just that. Hence, the storyteller is present at the key moment that initiates the very story he is a part of. At the gathering, Hawkbit arrives saying Dandelion told him about them leaving. This is followed by Dandelion's arrival. He warns about Toadflax, with whom he was totally open about finding rabbits who want to leave the warren. In the original story, outskirters wanting to leave is not an issue, but Toadflax is convinced Dandelion is part of a plot against the Threarar. When Captain Holly turns up, Dandelion does not hesitate to join the fight, attacking the guard Buckthorn first kicks. Dandelion, though not the largest rabbit by any means, is fast and strong for his size. In an enlightened warren he would easily be Owsler material. Dandelion is wounded in his shoulder during the fight. Later in the woods he praises Hazel's scouting ahead with the first mention of Elachrerar. This is also where Hazel realises how fast Dandelion is. Realising how exhausted Pipkin is getting, Hazel asks Dandelion to tell his first story, the story of the blessing of Elachrerar, which is Elachrerar's origin story in which he obtains the characteristics from Frith that enable rabbits to survive in a world full of enemies. Enemies who Frith made precisely to keep the children of Elachrerar under control. Dandelion arrives at the River Enbourne first along with Bigwig. When he sees Fiver and Pipkin on the improvised raft, he cannot understand what he is seeing, exclaiming loudly, but he accepts it and is one of the first in the river, and a very fast swimmer as well. Hazel nearly sends Dandelion to scout out the beanfield, but cannot resist going himself. He is not mentioned again until the rebellion on the common, which he does his best to ignore. However, he shows some doubt as to whether they will find their way out of the place, which prompts Hazel's promise. Dandelion picks up the old smell of a stoat as they continue. He reaches the other side of the common just ahead of Hawkbit and Fiver. He is happy with the place they have found and helps digging the scrapes as he senses rain may be on the way. Dandelion counsels Hazel sensibly on whether or not to trust Cowslip and rushes off once the decision is made, stopping to wait for the others. Once they are settled in the great burrow, Hazel asks Dandelion to tell their hosts the story of Elachrerar and the King's Lettuce, remembering how it was the one represented in the shape he was shown by Strawberry. This is the tale of Elachrerar tricking King Darzin into delivering his very best lettuces to Elachrerar's warren. But it seems these rabbits' admiration for the ultimate trickster has diminished over time. And soon we find out why, as Dandelion is first to arrive at Bigwig's snaring after Hazel raises the alarm. Hazel immediately places him in charge of crowd control. If you need something done fast, you ask Dandelion. When they think Bigwig is dead, Fiver addresses his terrible story of the Warren of the Snares first towards Dandelion, as it seems appropriate to direct his horrific tale at a storyteller. Bigwig having recovered, Dandelion then realises the crazy rabbit running towards them as being Strawberry. After the rats in the barn, Dandelion helps scout ahead as they cross open ground, and Hazel then chooses Dandelion to accompany him and Hawkbit to the top of Watership Down. Dandelion, of course, reaches the top first, where he utters his immortal words, "You can see the whole world," as well as, "Oh, Frith on the hills, he must have made it for us." Dandelion is at the foot of Watership Down when Holly and Bluebell arrive, and he bolts with Speedwell when they first realise there is a large animal nearby. When Bigwig first suggests it is the Black Rabbit, Dandelion is desperate to suggest alternatives, and when Hazel goes to find out the truth, Dandelion joins him, despite being terrified. Having found Holly in a dreadful state, Hazel tells Dandelion to reassure Bigwig and send Speedwell up the hill. Dandelion and Pipkin stay with Holly and Bluebell while they recover. He later reports that Holly has made good progress just after Hazel rescues the mouse, only asking why there is a mouse present after making his report. As Holly tells the terrible story of what happened at Sandalford, Hazel becomes annoyed at Dandelion on seeing the state of Holly's injured ear. But it turns out that Holly wouldn't let anyone touch it. Once it has received some attention, Bluebell, rather than Dandelion, tells the tale of the trial of El Herrar as they sylphlay. After the arrival of Kihar and his finding the large warren to the south, Dandelion rejects the notion of finding it out of hand and insists Hazel must not be part of the embassy to it. Significantly later, when Hazel decides to raid Nuthanger Farm while Holly's embassy is away, he rejects taking Dandelion with him, as he doesn't want anyone who will have opinions on the matter. It might have been better if he had. However, Dandelion is chosen for the second raid, at which the hutch rabbits will be rescued. The night before this raid, Dandelion tells an unspecified tale of El Herrar, which is followed by another tale that seems to reference Noah's Ark. After Bigwig's catfighting training, the raid begins, and Dandelion is the first to strike at the first cat they encounter. He had said he would be disappointed if they didn't meet a cat after their training, which he uses to good effect. Dandelion is placed on cat watch as the hutch is opened, but he gets nervous and gives 2 false alarms, so he and Speedwell take over the opening of the hutch. Once the hutch rabbits are out, Dandelion stays with the doe Haystack, who won't move until Bigwig orders him to get going. Hazel then tells Dandelion to come back with him to fetch the last 2 hutch rabbits. Dandelion hesitates to follow this order, but does so after Bigwig asks him if he will follow Hazel's orders, but not before Dandelion has asked Bigwig the same question back. They both clearly think Hazel is becoming reckless. On reaching him, he is asked to go and get the buck Laurel by a clearly nervous Hazel, but it is too late. The humans have arrived in their hrududu, and it is Dandelion who first notices the effect of the headlights on the eyes of the hovering cats. Dandelion is nearly driven Tharn by the lights, and it is only Hazel's orders that snap him out of it. The buck Laurel has to be left behind, but Hazel distracts the men so that Dandelion can get away with the doe Haystack, who realises over her panic that she doesn't want to go back to the hutch. It falls to Dandelion to break the news of Hazel being shot to the others. He goes back with Bigwig to see if he can see any sign, but all there are is human boot marks and blood. Dandelion is described as being inconsolable, as he might have stopped Hazel making a break for it, but Hazel very probably saved him from doing so. Just before the news that Hazel is alive, Dandelion is already trying to retain a positive frame of mind, and once this news arrives, Dandelion is quick to turn Hazel's mad dash into a heroic tale, now that it feels appropriate to do so. When Hazel then outlines his plan to return to Ephrafa, Dandelion just asks how many rabbits he will need before even knowing the details. As the rabbits rest in a coombe on their way to Ephrafa, a story is demanded of Dandelion, and, of course, Bigwig insists it is the tale of El Herrar and the Black Rabbit of Inlay, the terrible story of El Herrar's journey to the Warren of Death itself, with Rabscuttle in a desperate attempt to finally save his people from the army of King Darzin. Dandelion has not yet finished retelling his return to his warren many moons later, when a fox is spotted approaching them. Dandelion's next proper mention is during the escape from Ephrafa, when he escorts Pipkin to the rendezvous with Bigwig. Later, he is very nearly left behind as Woundwort arrives at the river. Fortunately, Bigwig is able to distract Woundwort by pretending to spot Kihar, and Dandelion makes a characteristic dash for freedom onto the punt. Once the punt gets stuck at the bridge, Dandelion dives straight into the river as soon as he sees Hazel made it. On the way back to Watership Down, Dandelion undertakes a patrol with Blackavar, after which the latter advises they have stopped in Fox Country. Bigwig checks with Dandelion, but he has no relevant experience. Blackavar turns out to have been tragically correct. Dandelion, along with Blackavar, are with Hazel as they are first to see the beach hanger on Watership Down again, and Buckthorn and Strawberry run to greet them. Once back on Watership Down, Dandelion is persuaded by Bluebell to tell a tale, joking that he should tell the one about how he nearly missed the boat. Dandelion settles on the tale of Rousby Woof, a tale that sums up the rabbit's dislike of dogs by telling of Elachrar and Rabscuttle's tricking of a particularly objectionable example. As he finishes the story, Dandelion remembers he is meant to be taking over from Acorn as sentry. Hazel goes with him, and this is where he meets the mouse that gives advance warning of the Ephratham Great Patrol. Later, as they are besieged underground, when Fiver has his terrible vision of a dog that gives Hazel his idea about how to defeat Woundwort, he instantly knows that one of the rabbits he needs is Dandelion. Dandelion accompanies Hazel all the way to Nuthanger Farm, leaving Blackberry at the road. He is told to position himself where the dog will see him, and tells Hazel they will have the makings of the best story ever if this works. Hazel says Dandelion will be the one to tell it. As Hazel chews the rope, he sees a cat approaching Dandelion and stamps the alarm, causing Dandelion to break from cover, narrowly avoiding the cat. The dog wakes up, sees Dandelion, and breaks the rope as it lunges towards him. Dandelion resists his instinct to hide and draws the dog straight down the lane to the road. The dog tests even Dandelion's speed, and he has to take refuge at a cattle shed where a rat advises him to sit tight before being confusingly told he wants to be chased by the dog. The dog is tiring a bit now, and having reached the road, Dandelion tells the scared Blackberry he will catch up and help if he can. Dandelion catches up with Blackberry at the pylon line, and they lure the dog up the scarp slope. As they reach the warren, they both dash down one of the blocked tunnels, and the dog does the rest. Having burrowed their way back into the warren, Dandelion and Blackberry tell their story, though it is uncertain what has become of Hazel. And that is the last mention of Dandelion in the original story. In the 1978 film, Dandelion's role is inevitably reduced by the non-inclusion of any tales of Elachrar beyond the one that opens the film, and even that one isn't told by Dandelion. We first encounter him as the hysterical Fiver shouts that he will need to leave the warren. Dandelion is then very keen to hear the conversation Fiver and Hazel have with the Threya. Dandelion joins the much reduced group who leave. As they make their way towards the River Enbourne, Dandelion comments on how the Lendry had just eaten, which was just as well. When they are attacked by the rats in the abandoned church, Dandelion kicks one of the rats away, showing that he can be an effective fighter. Later, in the rain, he tells Hazel they can't go on like this. When they meet Cowslip, Dandelion comments that these other rabbits will think they're afraid if they don't join them. Once inside the new warren, Dandelion comments to Silver that the place smells of man. Later, Hazel suggests that Dandelion tells a tale of Elachrar for their hosts, but Cowslip politely declines. Sadly, this is the closest Dandelion gets in this film to being a storyteller. When Bigwig is snared, Dandelion says he can't hear Bigwig breathing. He is also one of those urging them to take the warren from Cowslip. Later, when Holly turns up in the lane leading from Nuthanger Farm, Dandelion is first to ask him what happened to Sandalford. When he has done, Dandelion comments, "Men have always hated us." Then, as they climb Watership Down, comes Dandelion's most glorious moment in the whole film, as he exclaims with joy at the view from the top of Watership Down, adding that Frith made it all for them. Dandelion is one of the first to approach the newly discovered Quihar, and later he gets to be one of the stupid bunnies, as Quihar points out their lack of does. Dandelion is one of only 3 rabbits who go to Nuthanger to rescue the does, and he helps Hazel in chewing the leather straps of the hutch. The raid is a complete failure in this version, and we see Dandelion and Blackberry looking back at the farm in the dark after Hazel is shot. They tell Five what has happened, causing him to make straight for the farm. Much later, on their way to Ephratham, Dandelion asks Bigwig if he is injured after his encounter with the fox. And even later, after the escape from Ephratham, Dandelion tells Quihar to look after his wing when he leaves them for the Peag Varta. At the siege of Watership Down, we see Dandelion filling in holes with Blackberry. Dandelion stays positive, reassuring Pipkin. When Fiver's vision gives Hazel his idea, he asks for Dandelion and Blackberry to go with him, as in the book. However, Heisenley joins them at Bigwig's suggestion. Heisenley is left at the Iron Tree, and Blackberry part way up the lane to Nuthanger. Dandelion, as before, goes to Nuthanger with Hazel, and events there are very close to those of the book. He then runs down the lane, even running in a circle around the dog at one point. Dandelion then goes to ground near Blackberry. And that, sadly, is the last we see of him in the 1978 film. In the 1984 radio play, Dandelion appears as a voiced character. It is he who finds the piece of wood at the Enbourne along with Hazel, as Blackberry does not speak in this version. Cowslip encourages Dandelion to tell the story of the king's lettuce. Much later, Dandelion expresses some scepticism about Hazel's plan with the dog. We last hear from Dandelion as, much older, he speaks with the elderly Hazel just before his appointment with Ella. Dandelion is heavily involved in tales from Watership Down, as much of the book consists of tales of Ella. In fact, the first sentence of the book is "Tell us a story, Dandelion." He tells 4 of the 7 stories in part 1, the other 3 being told by Bluebell, Coltsfoot, and of course Speedwell. In part 2, which covers Ella and Rabscuttle's long journey back from the warren of the Black Rabbit of Inlay, Dandelion is explicitly stated as telling 2 of the 4 stories, the implication being that he also tells the other 2. In part 3, in which we get to hear what happened on Watership Down in the months after the siege, Dandelion's involvement is rather light. I guess he deserves a rest after all that storytelling. He expresses admiration for Flyeth after she leaves to start a new warren. Later, he answers Letty's questions about young Sandwort after his arrogance leads to a horrendous experience, and the chapter closes as he is about to make it a story. And that was the very appropriate last time Richard Adams ever mentioned Dandelion in his writing. In the 1999 to 2001 TV series, Dandelion is very different. He is a tall, lanky rabbit with a somewhat annoying voice which isn't entirely appropriate for a storyteller. However, he is very much a storyteller in this version. In fact, the representation of the tales of Ella are one of this series' best features. This is also the beginning of his association with Hawkbit. Dandelion's first line is when he denigrates Fiver's frequent rhyming visions by the Enbourne. Later, he tells the story of the blessing of Ella as they arrive just north of Nuthanger Farm. Once on Watership Down, Dandelion and Hawkbit tend to side with Bigwig, for example over not sharing the warren with seagulls and mice and over who should be digging it. Basically, it should be left to the gender-swapped Blackberry, the only doe. Later, Dandelion states that the Black Rabbit only takes the old and the sick to the land beyond life, when they hear Holly calling for Bigwig. This Dandelion is still physically brave, helping to ward off the weasel and also helping pin Bigwig down when he tries to insist on sacrificing himself to finally get rid of it. Bigwig having lost a game of bobstones over whether bucks will help dig the warren, Blackberry tries to teach Dandelion et al. How to dig. Him and Hawkbit are predictably useless at it, and they have reason not to be as it is raining hard. Dandelion joins Bigwig's comedy Owsler, but the laughter stops when they encounter the Afrafans for the first time. Dandelion's usual pattern is to go along with Hawkbit's curmudgeonliness, and yet he does so again when Hazel suggests getting does out of Afrafa. Dandelion does not take part in the raid of Nuthanger Farm. However, he does volunteer for the expedition to Afrafa, which annoys Hawkbit as he is chosen instead, a decision Dandelion doesn't exactly seem unhappy about. Later, Dandelion is a reluctant helper in the building of defences in the warren, though he also participates in the final expulsion of the weasel. As part of inspiring a raid on Nuthanger Farm, Dandelion briefly tells his second story in the series, the tale of Rowsbury Woof and the Fairy Bog Dog, the name having been updated from the novel to reflect changing attitudes. This was the first time this story was portrayed on film. The raid is nearly disastrous, and Hawkbit comments that the problem with Tales of Ella, as he is called in this series, is that they make everyone want to be like him. As Hawkbit is going through the trauma of discovering the largest cave system beneath Watership Down, Dandelion is above ground trying to become Bobstones champion. Later, as they all realise Hawkbit is missing, Dandelion and Pipkin become the comedy cowards, as they are also traumatised by the new discovery, thinking they have seen the Black Rabbit. When Blackberry explains what is causing this phenomenon, Dandelion gives the excuse of being a storyteller with a vivid imagination. He then becomes Bobstone's champion inside the very caves that had caused them so much fear. When the rabbits discover the greenhouse, Dandelion declares it to be Prince Rainbow's gleaming warren. He also tries out some tropical flavour inside, probably not very sensible. As Season 2 opens, we see Dandelion trying to organise the local wildlife Dandelion joins Hawkbit in more mildly inept raiding at Nuthanger Farm before they are tasked with escorting Hickory and Marigold back to Redstone Warren after their rescue from Cowslip's Warren. During their journey, Dandelion tells the first tale of Elachera, or Elara, invented for this series. The tale of Elara and the Valley of Wisdom, in which Elara gains the wisdom of digging burrows by leaping a great chasm. He goes on to tell Hickory of his recent journey into the cavern of the Crudidu, or a garage, in which he just shouted for it to stop, and it did. This has the unfortunate effect of Hickory ending up stuck on a traffic roundabout, as he becomes convinced that confronting Crudidu is the best way to become brave. And Dandelion ends up stuck there with him. Funnily enough, just walking in front of Crudidu in a group ends up being the best way to stop them. A risky strategy if ever I saw one. When Dandelion joins Hazel's ill-advised trip to the Big Water with Kihar, he ends up lost in a human market with Hawkbit, at one point finding rings landing on his extra long ears as he passes through a ring-toss stall. Once at the sea, he says Elara and Rabscuttle can never have had an adventure like this. He is also more open-minded than Hawkbit about male puffins sitting on nests. Overall, though, he ends up not liking the seaside at all. Somehow, he makes it back to Watership Down. When Bigwig comments negatively about badgers, Dandelion points out how he used to say that about seagulls. On the quiet, this version of Dandelion is proving to be very open-minded and tolerant. Is this because of his creative mind? Later, Dandelion expresses outrage at the treatment of Campion after he saved Woundwort from the shining wires. This leads to the Great Game, reflecting the tale of the trial of Elachera, which convinces Woundwort that Vervain is mad, freeing Campion in the process. Dandelion is part of the expedition to find Flayra for the Feast of Frith, and he points out that an occupied human mansion may be a source of food and shelter after Bigwig falls through ice. He says this night will become the tale of Bigwig and the Ice Rabbit. Once in the Warren of the Labyrinth, Dandelion helps keep Bigwig warm before joining the others in fetching Flayra in this far too human place. Kihar's news back on Watership Down that he thinks all the rabbits who left are dead prompts Pipkin to tell the tale that Dandelion normally would for the Feast of Frith, Elara and the Big Freeze. This is the second tale invented for this series and is a classic myth of the origin of the seasons. Meanwhile, Dandelion is involved in a desperate escape from the Warren of the Labyrinth with Flayra, which is complicated by the arrival of a fox. Ultimately, this leads to the introduction of the idea of some humans liking rabbits, one which Dandelion finds very strange. The following spring, a further inept raid on Nuthanger Farm leads to Dandelion being one of those who come across the fraudulent messengers of Prince Rainbow. We also see Dandelion looking after rabbit kittens, something you wouldn't catch curmudgeonly Hawkbit doing. Somehow you get the feeling that this Dandelion will be better off without him. When Watership Down is invaded by sheep, Dandelion ends up having to hide under them to avoid the resulting eagle. Later, he tells Hazel, after his attempt to negotiate with a sheepdog, that it probably has to actually see the sheep to begin herding them back to the farm. As they try to lure the dog to Watership Down, Dandelion is driven Tharn by the arrival of the dog and has to be rescued by Fiver. There was to have been an episode of Season 2 called Dandelion's Big Story, which would possibly have been a version of Elachera and the Black Rabbit of Inlay, but it was sadly never produced, being replaced by Bigwig's Way. Instead, we get the story of Bigwig becoming more tyrannical as head of the Watership Down Owsla. Dandelion actually defends Bigwig a bit, as he has a hard job to do. After Campion's first joyous visit to Watership Down, where he sees Dandelion happily playing with kittens, Dandelion plays a brave role in defending the Warren against the Efrafan attack through the caverns after they discover the hidden entrance. This battle results in Campion's presumed death. As Season 3 opens, Dandelion is equally brave during the dubious destruction of Efrafa. His lankiness is also reduced in the new animation style. After the defeat of Efrafa, the role of Dandelion and Hawkbit as pursuers of does is unfortunately introduced, as they both compete over a doe from Efrafa called Heather. This results in a competition to bring Heather the best Flayra from Nuthanger, which results in Dandelion getting stuck in a moving vegetable truck. He makes a heroic leap from the truck with his turnip and ends up down an old well. Hawkbit's attempt to save him by dropping rocks down the well to raise the water level is interpreted by poor Dandelion as an attempt to wipe out Hawkbit's competition. However, it does work, and they agree that bros should come before does, if you will pardon my butchering of an unpleasant phrase. They arrive back on Watership Down to be told that Heather is with Moss now, and all the Afrafans have left to pastures new. With the Afrafan danger apparently past, Dandelion continues as a member of Bigwig's comedy Owsler, and he has a lot of fun infuriating Bigwig in the process. But Fiver has a prophecy about Woundwort still being alive, as well as a feeling about Campion. Dandelion questions whether he just means his spirit still being with them, showing a capacity for deeper thought when he is not distracted by Hawkbit's nonsense. When Kihar introduces his new partner, Gluck, Hazel suggests Dandelion, among others, help teach her some etiquette. The response is that they have a nest of stoats to clear out. So that's a no then? As the new menace of Woundwort's Darkhaven becomes clear, Dandelion is put to work on concealing tracks, complaining that Primrose and Blackberry have created new ones while heading to Redstone. Meanwhile, Campion is trying to survive Darkhaven, and Hannah the Mouse is collecting the magic. As Silverweed's magic is used on Fiver's eyes to find Watership Down, Dandelion is placed in charge of Fiver at the road bridge. Fiver can never return to Watership Down if the rest of the expedition to Darkhaven do not return. Dandelion movingly promises to look after Fiver if that happens. Fiver manages to reverse the magic, but tells Dandelion he doesn't know how long he can hold it. With Silverweed rescued and on Watership Down, Dandelion is put to work on creating actual defences. However, Hawkbit draws him into his schemes again as he tries to use Silverweed to make Bigwig forget about them, resulting in Dandelion being ignored by everyone. Eventually, Dandelion becomes convinced that if they fall asleep they might be gone when they wake up. When the joke is revealed, they both react angrily towards Silverweed, just as he is trying to tell them that the rescued Spartina is actually a spy. When Spartina tries to escape, she is somehow held by Dandelion and Hawkbit, despite having previously defeated Campion. They now turn on each other, harming the defences in the process, as Hawkbit wastes a defensive boulder in order to persuade the voles who admire him and follow him everywhere to follow Dandelion instead. He does this by simulating an accident where Dandelion has to save him from a boulder. He then reports Dandelion for rolling it away. With friends like Hawkbit, who needs enemies? As battle approaches, Dandelion characterises their probable tactics as consisting of running down the hill with their ears flapping in the wind. However, when the battle actually starts, Dandelion proves brave and effective with a particularly nasty kick. As Bigwig returns, having somehow survived single combat with Woundwort before the battle, Dandelion comments that he missed a real fight. Dandelion has a speaking part in the 2002 BBC radio play and is sensible again. He arrives at the gathering at Sandalford with a silent Hawkbit and later tells his first story in the Honeycomb, The Blessing of Elachera, and accompanies Hazel on his first foray to Nuthanger Farm, as Pipkin is non-speaking. Later, he has to give Fiver the bad news that Hazel has been shot. We next hear from him during the siege, where he joins Hazel going to Nuthanger Farm. In the 2016 radio play, Dandelion warns Hazel of rumours of a plot against the Freya. I originally said this was new, but it actually is mentioned as having been suggested by Toadflax in the book. Dandelion helps Bigwig push the raft across the Emborn and helps calm down the dispute between Hawkbit and Bigwig on the common. Later, he and Fiver dig the snare peg out to save Bigwig. His reaction on seeing the view from Watership Down is subdued, and it is he who finds Kihar along with Bigwig. He then joins Hazel and Blackberry on their initial foray to Nuthanger Farm. He supports Hazel's plan to go to Efrafa, and we next hear from him during the escape, where he is trapped on the bank of the Test, as in the book, and makes a run for it. Back on Watership Down, Dandelion takes his usual part in getting the dog from Nuthanger, and we last hear from him as he urges Blackberry on as he takes over. And so to the Dandelion of the Netflix version, who is replaced as storyteller completely by Bluebell, who in the original novel only told the tale of the trial of Elachera, and reduced to the status of Hawkbit's wingman as they pursue Doze, though he is still a capable fighter. Having joined the group leaving Sandalford along with Big Hawkbit, Dandelion rapidly asks where they are going and who the leader is. At the Enborn, the whole group clamber onto a dustbin lid, and Dandelion, I think, helps Bigwig push it down, then across the river as they are pursued by the Owsla. At the abandoned church, Dandelion draws the crows away and is lifted off the ground by them briefly before being dropped. We next hear from Dandelion as he stamps the alarm as Holly arrives at the top of Watership Down. Dandelion is put to work digging the warren with Hawkbit and the doe Strawberry, with hilarious consequences. His digging is too manic, and later Hawkbit tells Strawberry that Dandelion is diseased to put her off him, which really wasn't necessary. This results in them fighting, which causes the two other parties to leave for Nuthanger and then Afrapha in order to find does. The Afrapha patrol leave without warning, leading Hawkbit to say they left because Dandelion nearly mortally wounded him. With everyone gone, Hawkbit and Dandelion crack on with warren digging. However, Strawberry is much faster, which genuinely impresses them. His involvement is rather light until they reach Overton on the River Test during the second mission to Afrapha, where he has to rescue Fiver from playing in traffic due to a vision of a Crudidu that will help them. During the escape from Afrapha, Dandelion is involved in repelling the Afraphan Owsla once Kihar arrives. Once back on Watership Down, Dandelion and particularly Hawkbit recommence their hobby of making fools of themselves with does, in this case Strawberry, until the Afraphan Great Patrol arrives, at which point they are put in charge of defending the wood run. Even there, Hawkbit doesn't shut up about Strawberry until Dandelion says he will kill him himself. Once the fighting starts, Dandelion fights bravely, at one point saving Hawkbit with a flying kick before being injured himself. We last see Dandelion being helped underground by Hawkbit as they retreat to the honeycomb. As he is injured here, Dandelion plays no part in luring the dog from Nuthanger Farm. We last meet this Dandelion in the peaceful aftermath of the battle. As Hawkbit complains about Strawberry not choosing either of them, a doe passes them, who Dandelion immediately follows, with Hawkbit following and complaining. So that is Dandelion, the storyteller and runner, and latterly the fighter, fool and flirter with does. Overall, this impressive character has not been well served by the various versions of Watership Down over the years, though the best version of his character, despite him losing his storytelling role, was definitely the 1978 film. Next time, in 2 weeks' time, we look at Blackberry, the genius.